I didn't see the hands of who hasn't seen Collateral Murder yet. Who hasn't seen that? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically tell the story of what happened that day. We were in Collateral, Iraq. We were tasked out that morning to do knock-and searches. The Apaches were providing overwatch for us. We had a small firefight, probably about 4 to 5 blocks away from where this incident took place. We heard the Apaches open fire, and what you have to understand is the Apaches, they don't shoot just like little rounds. They shoot 30mm rounds, which are about that big. I didn't know what was going on at the time. I was just told to move to that position. I was on foot, and when was one of the first 6 guys to run up onto the scene, and what I saw was a group of men on the corner who had been completely obliterated. These rounds explode when they hit, and to me, at the time, they didn't look human. They looked like something you would actually see out of a bad horror movie. Like, oh, this can't be real. I don't know if I thought that maybe my emotions were kind of shutting everything down and saying, okay, this can't be real. But one of the first things I remember hearing was a little girl crying, and I knew that the cry was coming from the van that was there. And I ran up to the passenger side door with one of the privates who was with me, and we looked inside the van, and the private that I was with started vomiting and ran away because he couldn't bear to look at the children the way they were. What I saw was a little girl. She was probably about 4 years old, sitting on the bench seat with a severe belly wound and glass in her hair and in her eyes. She couldn't blink or close her eyes, and she was crying like it wasn't a pain cry. It was a cry that me having children, knowing that my daughter was the same age as this little girl, waking up from a horrible nightmare in the middle of the night, and it was almost blood curdling. Next to her, in the middle of the bench seat, half on the floorboard with his head resting on the bench seat, was a boy about 7 years old. I immediately thought he was dead because he had a severe wound to the right side of his head. And in the driver's seat was who I assumed was the father, the way he was hunched over them in a protective manner. And he was completely destroyed. There was no way that he had survived. I grabbed the little girl out of the van, yelled for a medic, and we took her to the house that was directly behind the vehicle, where I took off my gloves, got water, and rinsed the wounds, checked for any exit wounds, other wounds that she might have had, and was picking glass out of her eyes with my hands so that she can blink. That's when in the video you can hear the medic say that there's nothing else we can do here, she needs to be evac'd. He takes the little girl and he runs her to the Bradley. I go back outside to the van, and I don't know actually why I went to the van. I thought that the boy was dead and the father was dead, but when I went back out there, the boy took a labored breath, and that's when I started screaming out that the boy's alive, the boy's alive. And I picked him up in my arms and started running towards the Bradley with him, the whole time telling him, it's going to be okay, don't die, don't die. And at this point, he looked up at me, just for a split second, then his eyes rolled back into his head. And at that moment, I thought he had died in my arms. But I got him to the Bradley, and when I took him to the Bradley, my commanding officer, or my platoon leader, was there. And he told me that I needed to quit worrying about these MFing kids and to go pull security. At the time, the only thing I could think of was, roger that, and I went to pull security. While sitting on the rooftop, I could hear them firing the Hellfire missiles into houses. I saw the pictures of the families that were in these buildings. There were no armed men in these buildings. They were just families, women, children, who were killed. I got back to the fob later that day, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, there's no way that we did that. You know, it had to have been the men on the corner. There was one guy who had an RPG and one guy who had an AK-47. And, you know, from being over there, you're like, okay, well, these guys are obviously insurgents if they have weapons, not knowing that these other men were cameramen. And what frequently happens in Iraq is if there's a person with a camera, people will come out of their homes and say, hey, look at me, this is what I have, put me on TV, put me on the news, make me famous, now pay me for my picture. There was no RPG rounds in the RPG. So that, to me, my reaction is that I don't think that they were armed to fight us. They were just showing off for the cameramen that were there. But later on that night in the fob, while I was washing the blood of the children off of me, I couldn't really cope with it. I was having a hard time dealing with the fact that we did that. The Apaches did that. So I went to my staff sergeant who was in my line, in my chain of command, and I told him I think I need to see mental health. I need to go talk to somebody because I'm having a hard time dealing with what I had just seen, what I had witnessed, what I was a part of. And he laughed at me and told me to get the sand out of my vagina and to quit being a pussy and to suck it up and to be a soldier. And so, you know, you kind of like, okay, well, there's nothing else I can do. So you just kind of you kind of suck it up. You push everything down, you bottle it up. But that anger and that rage sits inside you, and it gets to the point where it just bubbles over. And you get so angry that you start yelling at people who don't deserve it. Family members, your privates, soldiers who are your brothers. And you know, that was just one incident, and I've been saying this for a long time. That was one incident of many that you guys got to see. Things like this happened almost on a daily basis in Iraq. It may not have been an Apache, it could have been a Bradley. I saw a Bradley fire on a van load of children, nothing more than children, and watch the Iraqi police pull bodies out, pieces of children, and the whole time they're looking at us shaking their heads. And you know, it's again, that was one incident, but you guys can see from that one incident that we shouldn't be there, that we're over there and we're killing innocent people. These are people who are only trying to live their lives and the best that they can during an occupation. I got out of the Army in 2009. I was blown up in Iraq in November of 2007. I came home. My spine was broken. I have metal rods and pins in my back. The Army kicked me out on a Chapter 517, which states that everything that I had, my traumatic brain injury, my PTSD, and my broken spine, were all pre-existing conditions before I joined the military. So I got no benefits from the Army whatsoever, and I'm not the only one. This has happened to over 250,000 soldiers coming home from war. They're saying that, oh, they obviously had this PTSD long before they joined the Army. And you know, it's not only are the people of Iraq and Afghanistan the victims, but soldiers are the victims themselves. They are being victimized every day, whether they have post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury or military sexual trauma. They're being placed right back into the same traumas that got them that to begin with. They're 4 or 5 deployments. You know, soldiers are just as much the victims, and once I realized that I was being victimized from the military and that they were using what I grew up very conservative. I grew up thinking, you know, it's my duty to serve in the military. When 9/11 happened, I ran out and I joined the military. I have to go serve. I have to go fight the Muslims who who attacked us on 9/11. And what I found strange is when I got to Iraq is I felt that I had more in common with the people over there than I did with the people who sent me to war to begin with. And so that day especially, the Collateral murder video, I could no longer justify why I was in Iraq, what we were doing in Iraq. I was just watching innocent men, women, and children being slaughtered. There were no so-called insurgents. We would drive around waiting to start something. So,